Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
we have is our adjusted massage figures. Um, so, and the problem is, they hardly they say that there's been a well, they actually say, as far as I could see in the IPC, that yes, the sun has influenced us over history, over a long period, but now that's irrelevant because CO2 has taken over.
Yeah,
That's what they have said.
yeah.
So they sort of covered their bases a little bit by saying yes, sun has been a factor, but then they've actually created their own little quagmire because why doesn't it still affect us? Why has it suddenly stopped in the last 50 years or 20 years? Why has CO2 become the dominant force? And suddenly the sun is being discounted.
Absolutely, and I mean, there's great research by Danish professor from Copenhagen, Henrik Svensmark, who's done a book
Yes.
called "The Chilling Stars," which basically goes more into details about this and cloud cover and things like this, and because again,
Cosmic rays, yeah.
absolutely, we're coming into a different, I guess, era or epoch right now as well in terms of the weather. We are having incredibly cold weather up here in the north, and UK has one of the worst, winters in about 100 years, I think, they in total. So something is definitely changing there. But now, so their argumentation should be starting to fall apart, and in some camps, then they absolutely are. But what do you see this is going here in the future, depending on if we get continued cold weather? Do you think that they will spin this in the direction of saying, yeah, but this is actually also because of CO2 or global warming, because and fill in the blanks,
Yes.
if you will,
Yeah.
right there.
Well, yeah, they are having a tough time, the poor guys. As for the work for Svensmark's work, that's pretty awesome, and that's to do with cosmic rays and showing a inverse correlation between solar and cosmic rays. And in my presentation on my website, I do actually talk about that, but in the movie, I left it out. I thought it was just getting too much detail. I mean, I was trying to go for the intelligent layman to get the central points, of the argument. I mean, it's a massive field of study, and
Yes.
I was trying to go for the central ones. Cosmic rays is definitely an alternative hypothesis, and because it was still a hypothesis, I thought I'd leave it out. I try to keep to the harder facts. Well, there's always say facts, harder hypotheses, shall we say. But yes, I was very tempted to include the cosmic ray. I did sort of hint at it a little bit because I did talk about solar forcing. Yes, well, you raised quite a few points there. The another point you mentioned was, oh, it's all cold at the moment, and snowing left, right, and center, and Ireland's in trouble with massive floods, and yeah, all this cold spell going across, and the iguanas falling out of the trees in Miami because they're going into stasis because there's not enough temperature for their cold-bloodedness. Yeah, which is quite funny. We have iguanas here as well. They're very cool-looking lizards. Very colorful. I mean, all of the world, there's a cold snap. I mean, here in Sydney right now, it's very deliciously balmy and warm, but there's a cold snap in the world, in the Northern Hemisphere especially. And then the Chinese, one of the officials from the equivalent of the Met Office, I think, of the Bureau of Climate Change or something like that, because they actually play with the climate in China quite a lot. They do a lot of cloud seeding. One of the officials at the bureau there said, "Yeah, this cold snap is proof of global warming." It's like, well, sorry? Yeah, well, him, I guess, trying to infer the fact that it's a destabilization of natural, rhythms, so therefore must be global warming, because global warming is all about destabilizing the environment, which I would disagree with totally. And as I show in the movie, there are not any more hurricanes, there aren't any more floods. If anything, global warming actually stabilizes the environment, and most scientists would agree with that, even though politicians seem to be spinning that catastrophe scenario in terms of not necessarily like a tipping point catastrophe scenario, but just a general destabilization of the environment, which is not the case. Warming generally stabilizes.
So what's your take on the whole approach of what CO2, carbon dioxide, actually is? The EPA over in the States, for instance, have basically classified CO2 as a pollutant. What's your take on this, James?
Well, that's really bringing it into politics more than anything to do with science, of course. The whole EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency ruling, or the edict laid down by President Obama, is a complete contravention of the whole legislative process in America. and you're wondering why the Senate are up in arms because they've just been bypassed. So the whole of Congress has to agree on this emissions trading, a cap and trade, whatever you want to call it, scheme that President Obama wants to put in place. But they're not. They got it through the House of Representatives, the lower house, but the upper house are like, wait a second, this is going to cost us a lot, and we're not sure about it. We're not going to go for it. We're actually going to say no. And President Obama is saying, well, I'm trying to show to my international political friends who aren't really taking me seriously because I haven't actually produced any of the goals that I had set myself to. The Middle East is still in strife. I haven't sorted that out, and I can't do the most important for the Americans, I guess, is their medical bill can't get through. It's a complete mess. At least I can get this one sorted. I'll just circumvent the whole process and say that CO2 is a pollutant, which means that it goes straight through any having voting process. There's no transparency. It goes straight through that, and the EPA can then classify it along like arsenic poisoning of your river. And therefore, any CO2 that industry gives off, they can say that's a pollutant, and they can fine them. Done deal. No Congress agreement required. And doing that, and some slightly more right-wing networks like Fox and some other networks which are not so right-wing or not so on the ball, aren't even mentioning it. They're keeping quiet about it. But people like networks like Fox are going, wait a second, and telling the American people this is what's happening. President Obama, this is what the biggest tax in your history, what he wants to be greater than the tax that cost America for World War II of all things. That's how much we want to fork on you. And we haven't even voted on it, let alone had a referendum, like a national vote. So yeah, the whole EPA thing is a shocker. And I think personally, I was fully for President Obama, of course, when he first came in. We all wanted to have a first black president in America. It's a very important thing, I think, for society and for people around the world to see that. And Americans knew that. But unfortunately, I don't think he's delivering by doing those sort of tactics. He's got to win his battles, openly, not underhandedly.
Well, that kind of connects us with the whole debacle with the Nobel Peace Prize and stuff like that, considering that Obama got that and now sending more troops to Afghanistan. That's a side note, though, but what we can mention in regards to the Peace Prize is, of course, Al Gore and IPCC being given this as well. What do you think about that?
Well, I went to a very fancy public school in the UK, and when I looked at the sort of the process occurring, it was that sort of old fuddy-duddy and respect and all that, which is good. And I loved my school. It was an awesome school, and I loved that sort of 500-year-old school and the history and all that. And I felt that was sort of happening as I saw Al Gore walk down and Cowrie to pick up his Nobel Prize as well. And I was thinking, you're going through this process, and I have so much respect for that process. But what it's been turned into is a complete farce. I found it pretty sad, actually, because I like the Nobel Prize is the highest honor, really, mankind. This is what people believe. The general people in the world, when you hear about Nobel, whether it be for peace prizes or for medicine or for science, you really think this is the highest, award, honor that man can give someone. And you're thinking, oh my God, what's happened here? I mean, how did this happen? Because it's a complete subversion of the process, and it really is dumbing it down, and it's just a shame. I think it's pretty sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And, you touched upon something previously here that was kind of interesting in terms of some of the developments over in China and so forth. You mentioned briefly cloud seeding. There is a lot of talk about weather manipulation in different ways, of course, using different technologies and doing things like this. Is this an area that you've been looking into at all? Is there a possibility here for technologies being used in order to steer weather or weather systems in certain directions, for instance, to I guess spur on the illusion, if you will, then of global warming and climate change? James, what do you think?
Well, man will inevitably try to control everything around it. That's what we do. And we're considering how small and insignificant we are. I'm quite impressed by how much we can influence our environment. But, at the same time, we are just a blip, and some would consider a parasite on the planet. I don't consider ourselves a parasite. But we're only insignificant. The climate will do whatever the climate will want to do. It is way more powerful than anything that we can control. Now, locally, for instance, in the